Good morning, students. Today we are going to start with the unit concerned with the cell signaling in the course title of Cell Biology for the BSc Part 1 students. Now, what is cell signaling? First, we need to introduce ourselves to the concept of cell signaling. Cell signaling, just like I'm communicating with you, I'm talking with you, I'm trying to send out my voice or my signal through voice to you. I'm trying to teach you, I'm trying to explain things to you by communicating, by talking to you. This, I'm trying to send out a signal in the form of voice, and you are receiving it in the form of sound at the and you're trying to learn it. You're trying to grasp it. So that is I am sending out, I have given out a signal, I've sent out a message, and you have received it. So, this communication between two different individuals. Now, if we talk it in the sense of cell biology, then it is the communication between the two different kinds of cells or two similar kind of cells. The two cells are trying to communicate or exchange messages from one another, and in response to those exchange of messages, they are taking appropriate action. Just like as I say that please raise your hands, you do raise your hands. Another or you may deny to raise your hand if you think that action is not appropriate. Similarly, the cells will also take up the message, and they may conform to the instruction, or they may deny to conform to the instruction. So that is, they are communicating and they are responding to that particular communication or the message. This communication between the cells is known as cell signaling. Now, what are the components of a typical signaling pathway? When a cell tries to signal or send out a message, it is sending out the message in the form of an extracellular signal molecule. This extracellular signal molecule, because it is secreted by the cell, sent out by the cell, and given out in the extracellular matrix or on the plasma membrane of the another cell. So it is an extracellular signal. The signal molecule is not generated from within the cell. That is why it is known as extracellular. Then this next component is a receptor protein. The signal has been sent out and it should be received by some molecule or protein on the plasma membrane. So you remember the concept of the integral proteins and the peripheral proteins. So they are specific for each signal. There is a specific receptor, just like a lock and key function. So each signal will have its own receptor. So the signal will be received on a receptor protein. From here, the signal will be passed on to the cell interior. Now, for passing on to the cell interior, it may generate or more of the intracellular signaling proteins or molecules that may pass on the message from one molecule to the other molecule. So you have the intracellular signaling proteins, the proteins or the molecules that are being generated within the cell. Next in line in the pathway are your target proteins. Where should the signal finally strike out? Where is the target where the response will be generated? That is your target protein. So, in the cell system, it may be a metabolic enzyme or a gene regulatory protein or a cytoskeletal protein. So, In response to this extracellular signal, now the target proteins will generate a response. This response, in case of a metabolic enzyme, will be altered metabolism. In case of gene regulatory protein, it may change the gene expression. So you find an altered gene expression. In case of the cytoskeletal protein, you find changes or modification in the cell shape or the movement. So these are the typical components: the signal molecule, the receptor molecule, the intracellular signaling proteins, the target proteins, and the response. Now, when we talk of again and again, we are talking of the signaling molecules. Now, how many types of signaling molecules can we define? Broadly, if we talk of these signaling molecules, they may be classified or categorized as a hydrophilic molecules or hydrophobic molecules or gaseous components. The hydrophilic molecules may include proteins, small peptides, amino acids, or nucleotides. The hydrophobic molecules may include steroids, retinoid, or fatty acid derivatives. The gaseous components may include dissolved gases like nitric oxide and carbon monoxide. Now, whatever the kind of the signal molecule, the receptors will be classified in two broad categories, that is, the cell surface receptors and the intracellular receptors. Now we have talked about broadly two kinds of signals, that is hydrophilic signal and the hydrophobic signal. We discuss about the gaseous molecules later on, but we are concerned mainly with these two types, the hydrophilic and the hydrophobic. Now, the hydrophilic molecule is a water soluble molecule, and as you know, the plasma membrane structure is a lipid bilayer, and it won't allow the hydrophilic signal to directly penetrate through the plasma membrane. The permeability barrier will not allow the signal to pass on through. So, there needs to be a receptor on the surface of the cell itself, that is, on the plasma membrane, where the signal molecule can attach, and then from there it will be passed on to the interior of the cell. So, these molecules will have the receptors on the cell surface or on the plasma membrane, and thus the name the cell surface receptors. Another kind of molecules, that is the hydrophobic molecules or the lipophilic molecules. Now when we talk of hydrophobic molecules and your extracellular matrix is mostly aqueous, these molecules would not be able to travel through that medium, so they need a carrier protein by which they can bind, and through the help of this carrier protein, they will travel to the cell. Now, here, because they are lipid soluble and the plasma membrane structure is a lipid bilayer, so they don't have a permeability barrier to cross. They simply diffuse across the plasma membrane directly and also penetrate through the nuclear envelope. Now, the receptors are within the cell itself. No receptor is present on the cell surface for this purpose. So, the receptors are within the cell. That means these are the intracellular receptors. Or, in other words, they are alternatively also known as nuclear receptors, because most likely the receptor is present in the nucleus or on the genomic component of the cell. Now, the forms of the intercellular signaling. How will the cells communicate with each other? Two different cells are trying to communicate or signal or send out signals or messages to each other. How will they do it? So, as you can see from the diagram, you have Basically, as this shows, you have four kinds of intercellular signaling path methods. That is, first is a contact dependent signaling. This is also known as juxtacrine signaling method. Now, in this method, the two cells that are in communication, one is sending out the signal and another is the target